Welcome into Fire Mountain Gems and Beads. Today, we are going to be showing you how to make this beautiful turquoise, sterling silver, and crystal fashions wire wrapped ring. I absolutely love wire wrapping rings, and it's not something we do enough of, so I'm so excited to get to show you how to do this today. It's really not that hard. There's just 3 materials, and you're going to learn the skill set to do it. Make sure and like, share, and subscribe the video if you love it. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about the materials. We have got some of these great 10mm flat round, kind of puffy turquoise beads, some crystal passions, tiny 3mm bicones that are the perfect accent for the turquoise, and then some 22 gauge half hard sterling silver wire. It's a round wire. All right, so the first thing we'll do is just cut our wire. I'm going to cut about 22 inches, maybe just an inch or 2 extra. So I'm just going to pull that off the roll. Let's see here. I'm pretty good at eyeballing it. You can actually get out a tape measure if you need it. A little kinked up on the roll, 1 second. Okay, I'm feeling good about that. All right, and then the wire isn't perfectly straight, and I want it to be, I want to get all the kinks out. So I'm going to take my wire straightener, and at the end of the wire, I am going to wrap that around the wire. There's 3 little sections, and I'm pulling the wire through. And that feels pretty good. Now we're ready to wrap our ring. And what we're going to wrap around is called a ring mandrel. This is a stainless steel mandrel. And as you can see, there are numbers up the side of the mandrel, and that tells you what size of ring you're making. Now, when you're wrapping around the mandrel with half hard wire is a little springy. So I'm actually going to wrap about a size and a half smaller than the ring that I want to create. So I think I want to create a size 8 ring that will fit my ring finger. And so I'm going to wrap right at the 6.5 mark. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and thread the turquoise bead onto my wire, and I'm going to center that. So we'll grab the end of the wire. Pick a really pretty turquoise bead. I like this kind of deep one. And we'll just thread that on there. Okay, and then you just kind of want to get it toward the center of the wire. So to do that, I usually grab both ends at about the same place and just find the center. That feels really good right there. Then I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to push it downward on either side, straight down from the bead. So we have the nice flat bead here at the top. That's going to be the top of the ring. And then we have the wire coming down. Then I'm going to take my chain nose plier, just like that. And I'm going to find the bottom of the bead, and I'm going to make a bend upward from the bottom area of the bead. So it'll be a millimeter or 2 down from the side that I just bent down. And that's going to be pretty important so that the bead sits flat on the ring mandrel. I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay. I'm going to take a look at it and make sure my bends look pretty good, about the same. One is a little longer than the other. So I'm going to straighten that back out and make it just slightly longer because I do want them to be uniform for the ring to look really good. That looks about right. Okay. Now I'm going to set that bead right at the 6.5 mark because I want a size 8. So it's 1.5 sizes up. Different people do this differently. This is just my method because the wire is going to spring out a little bit. And then I'm going to kind of clamp it at the 6.5 mark. And I'm going to wrap one side around and the other side around the opposite direction. And it'll kind of move around on you, so you just have to do some adjusting. That's about right there. So we have our first wrap, and that is the beginning of our ring. Then I'm going to try and keep this kind of tension on both sides of the wire, and I'm going to wrap 2 wraps above and all the way around, and keeping that tension, and 2 wraps below. And it's already moving down to the 7, so I'm going to move that back up a little bit. There was 1 wrap and then 2 wraps. Once you get it wrapped again, you can move it around. But we want to end up with 2 wraps on either side of those original wraps. Okay. And I'm kind of moving that guy back up to the 6.5 mark and squeezing all my wraps together. You can use your fingernails, or you can clamp the bottom with your finger and grab a chain nose plier if you don't have fingernails. Either way. All right. Now, here's the trick. You want to keep as much of the tension as you can, and we're going to slide this off the ring mandrel and set the ring mandrel aside. So I want to really kind of try and keep those wraps together. And all right. And then I'm just kind of clamp it between my thumb and forefinger right here at the bottom where these wires, the tails are coming out, just like that. And at this point, it will have grown a little bit. So the next thing we're going to do is use one of the tail wires to wrap right around near the bead to secure it, and then we'll do the other side. But before we do that, I want to see how much this has grown, because I really do want to end up with an 8. So we might need to do some adjusting. So 7.5, it's right at 8, just like I had planned. Isn't that crazy how quickly it expands like that? So I am going to keep this clamped between my thumb and my forefinger, really making sure that that doesn't expand too much. And I want all the wires to kind of be around the same plane. And then I'm going to bring one of the tails up right, and I'm going to curve it around so it kind of naturally lays right where the bead is resting, making sure I don't lose any of that tension. And I will clamp that with my chain nose pliers right near that bend. And I'm keeping lots of pressure on. And I'm going to wrap around once and then around a second time to secure that. And you can see they're kind of coming out. That's okay. We're going to put them back together here. Now, before I do the second wrap, I am going to put it back on my ring mandrel and just check the size. We are still at an 8. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm going to bring the other tail up, curve it around so it kind of rests right near that bead. Take my chain nose pliers and clamp those wires. Oh, that sprung out a little bit. I got to fix it. And if it springs out, check the size again before you wrap. You might want to make some adjustments. I think we've gone out a little bit further now. It's at a 9. So, and the reason being is that my first wrap has fallen down. So I'm going to pull that first wrap up right against the bead. And I'm going to use the loose tail and pull that in a little bit, making adjustments until I get back to the size that I want. This is a really normal part of a wire wrapping process for a wire ring. Okay. I'm feeling like that is back to where I want it. And before I wrap it, I'm just going to check it real quick. It's back at an 8. That's good. Okay. I'm going to make sure the first wrap is where it belongs. I'm going to push that up with my fingernail. And then I think I'm just going to clamp it with my fingers real close, and I'm going to wrap a couple of times to secure this side. And it's a bit of a messy wrap ring. It's something that's actually pretty popular, and it's okay that it's not perfect for this kind of a ring. Okay, I'm bringing both of my wraps up and feeling really good about that. I'm going to clamp the bottom here. And the wraps will still move at this point. That's okay. We're going to fix that in just a second when we do the decorative wraps around the stone. Okay, so I'm going to start with that first wrap that I made because that's the one that's wanting to move the most. And I'm going to bring the wrap around so it's coming over the ring. And I'm going to make sure that it's nice and straight at this point. So I might take my nylon jaw pliers and straighten that out a little bit. I don't want any kinks in it or bends. I want it to be really clean because we're going to use the natural curve of the wire and go around that turquoise bead. And we want this to be up really close to that bend. And you only want really like a millimeter or so of space between the wire and the ring. So it takes a little adjusting. Once you get it where you want it, I can bring this tail out of the way. Once you get it where you want it, just wrap it once around the ring. And I do that kind of ahead of that other wrap that's already there. So closer to the bead than that wrap. And just once around like that. And so we have our first wire coming around. That's our first decorative wrap. And then I'm going to leave that tail out of the way. And then I'm going to bring the other tail on the other side of the bead. And also make sure that there's no kinks on that side. So let's straighten that out a little bit. And wrap that around your bead. Okay, and then you're going to make one wrap just like you did before. This will go over the other wraps on the other side, but that is just fine. Just bring it as close to the bead as you can. All right. So we have our first two decorative wraps, and it's okay at this point to make some little adjustments on those. Make sure it looks like you want it to look. I'm pretty happy with that. I might squeeze my original wraps together a little bit and round it out. Okay, now we're going to make the decorative wrap that goes on the outside that has the little crystal passions. Crystals, these are blue zircon. So we're going to thread on 3 blue zircon crystals. Then we're going to make a little loop in the wire to keep the crystals where we want them. Bring it around and finish that side. So let's grab our crystals and thread those on. There's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we're going to let those fall all the way down. And we're going to take our round nose pliers, the very, very tip of them. We're going to clamp right against the beads. And I'm going to pull that wire around the tip to make a little loop that faces the bead toward the bead. And I'm going to let the wire come back and just let the tail fall naturally where in the line with the beads. And then we're going to bring that around and let it kind of curve. And we want it just a bit bigger than the original wrap that's going here. Just very slightly. And then I'm going to wrap that tail around the ring several times to completely secure this side. All right, there's 1, I'm going to do at least 2 more. I could do 3 more. Let's see how it looks. I just want them to look like they're uniform. There's 2 wraps. There's 3 wraps. See how I feel about that. I think I'm going to go 1 more. We'll go for 4. And I'm going to bring that tail all the way under to the opposite side. And I'm going to cut it off, not underneath. You know, most of the time when you're doing a wrapped piece, you cut off your tail on the very inside of the project. But the inside of the project here is where your finger is, and you don't want the edge right at your finger. So I'm going to kind of cut it off halfway up the side here. Just there, real close. And then as always, whenever you cut off a tail of wire, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers or a flat nose plier, and I'm going to go around in a little circle and just squeezing in to make sure the tail is nice and tucked in and it won't catch anything, especially your skin. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put 3 of the blue zircon crystals on the opposite side to balance that out. There's 1, 2, and 3. Let those fall down all the way to the bottom there again. And then we're going to take the very tip of the round nose pliers right against those crystals when they're all the way toward the base. And we'll go ahead and make a little loop, and that locks those crystals in place there. Just like that. And then we're going to bring the wire around this side, fairly close to that first wrap. Want just a little bit of space between the 2. And then I'm going to finish off the other side. And once you get ready to wrap, just check the position of that wire again. And then I'm going to wrap 4 times just like I did on the other side, so I have a balanced look. So there's 1. Let's get a second one here. And I can mangle the end of this. It's fine. We're going to cut that off. That's what happens when you wrap. 2. 3. At this point, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and just snug my wraps together because they're a little far apart. I like them to be nice and close up together. I probably will even take it and just kind of put a little pressure on that last wrap. There we go. And bring the last one through. And remember, you're coming up the side, not on the bottom, when you cut off that tail. So we'll snip off that tail nice and close. And then I'll take my chain nose pliers and I'll just squeeze gently, go around a little circle and make sure my tail is nice and snug. And I'll even snug up my wraps again. I might even flip it around to the other side and make sure the other side are nice and snug as well. Good, I like that. Okay, now it's time to look at the top here. Look at the design and see if you want to make any adjustments. So you can take your round nose pliers or your chain nose pliers, even just your fingernails if you have that, and just kind of manipulate the wire a little bit if you feel like it needs it. I feel pretty good about this. I like the way that that looks. Now, what I'm going to do to finish off the ring really and make sure that I'm at the correct size, I'm going to put it back on the ring mandrel, and I'm really going to push down, and I'm going to twist, and that gets the wires that are on the bottom here all to be flush together, stretched properly, nothing's kind of out of place. And I'm going to twist it, and it's right on the 8, right where I wanted it, which is great. All right, so we have our beautiful size 8 ring. Now, you'll notice on the original ring here, we've got this pretty antique look to it. And so I'm going to show you now how to make the antique look for your ring. So let's set that aside. And in order to get this beautiful shiny silver to have this really pretty antique look, we're going to use some patina gel, which is really just stabilized liver of sulfur. Doesn't smell great, but it does really good things. So use it in a ventilated area like my big open studio here. Okay, so I'm going to paint the patina gel on with a paintbrush. But before I do that, I'm going to dilute it because you can see here that even though we have an antique look, it's a pretty light antique. It's not heavy antique. It's still very silver. We didn't get it real black. We've got some real nice definition here in some of the little valleys between the wire. And that's great, but most of it is pretty silver. And when you're antiquing with patina gel, you can go anywhere from black to a very, very light grayish. So in order to dilute that, I'm going to take a little dish of water here and one of my triangle trays. This is a really easy way to do it. And just scoop up a few drops of water in your triangle tray. Doesn't need to be very much, just a little corner of it there. And then I'm going to take just a drop of the patina gel. It doesn't really take very much. So just a little drop of patina gel in that, maybe 2. And that's all we're going to need. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and just mix that up. And so it's kind of uniform consistency there. So it's all mixed in. So now we have a dilute liver of sulfur here, stabilized liver of sulfur with the patina gel. And what I'm going to do next, you can use a glove, or sometimes I'll just grab a paper towel and I'll hold the piece so I don't get the liver of sulfur on my fingers. And I'm going to start painting the wire, and I'm going to do it very quickly. It's okay if you get a little bit on the stones or the crystals, it won't hurt it. So I'm just going to make sure that the whole thing gets covered fairly quickly. The reason that I'm doing it quickly is that it will pretty quickly turn black, and I only really want it to go to a gray state. I don't want it to get super black. Let's put one of those down there and I'll paint on that. Okay, so once I've got it all painted, make sure you get the underside too. I'm going to let it sit for a minute, and you can see it's already really changing color. You can see that going to like a bronzish color, and the longer it sits, the darker it gets. So I'm going to let it sit for another maybe 30 seconds here and let it get a little bit darker. And see how that's going. If you missed any spots, you can go back. Like I feel like I missed a little spot there, little spot there. Just let it keep processing. It's doing really well. It's getting much darker. And that's the beauty of adding a little bit of water to the liver of sulfur before you start. Because it makes the processing speed on darkening much slower, so you have more working time with it. If you had painted it on just out of the bottle, it would go immediately black. And liver of sulfur doesn't work on everything. It's great for sterling silver, silver filled too. Now to stop this process, all I'm going to do is take my little dish of water, and I'm just going to drop it in the dish of water. That immediately stops it from darkening anymore, because basically we're diluting it much further. And I'm just going to, it's not going to hurt your fingers or anything. Swish it around there so it gets in all the crevices, and then take it back out. And now it's stable. It's where it's going to be. It won't process anymore. So we got kind of a medium tone on the whole thing. It didn't go completely black. It's definitely not silver. It's almost a brownish color. Now, in order to get it to this really pretty silvered look, I'm going to take some steel wool, some sanding pads, and sanding stick, and I'm going to buff off a lot of that product. But first, I'm going to protect this area. All right, so let's go ahead and start buffing that out. So I'm going to start with some steel wool. Just a little piece is all you need. You can get that at your local hardware store or big box store. I've got a little tail here sticking out. I'm going to fix that. There we go. And all you're going to do is protect your stone. You know, I like to put my finger over the stone, maybe over the crystals a little bit. And I'm just going to start working it with the steel wool. You'll see lots of it comes off. And see how it's already taking that bronze off, but it's leaving a really pretty antique silver finish. The nice thing about the steel wool is it really gets in the kind of crevices. It's not really going to hurt your stone. I just try not to scrub over the stone. And just flip it around and just get it everywhere. You can see that bronze color, and you want to bring it back to that pretty antique silver color. So you want to just make sure and get all the little areas that have that bronze color. You can flip this stone sideways if you need to a little bit. Get it all that wire. Flip it around to the inside. Make sure you're getting the inside really well. Just work it. Take your time. All right, next I'm going to take a sanding pad, just kind of a medium to light grit, like this brown one here in the set. These sets of sanding pads are one of my favorite tools, and I'm just going to go over it a little bit more. It's a little heavier than the steel wool, and it's going to bring up a little more of the silver. And so there's some little places in here that I'm having a hard time getting to. I'll kind of move my wire around a little bit. Move my stone. And then we have these great sanding sticks that are fantastic. And they have this little bitty edge, like a corner on there. And I use that corner to get into really tight spots. And that'll get the kind of bronze color from the patina gel off those tighter areas too. That feels really good. Last minute adjustments. You can move your wire around at this point, round it out a little bit if you need to, change the shape if you want a different shape. I'm actually really liking how this one came out. It's not as rounded as the original. It's got more of an elongated look, but I just think it's so pretty. I love it. And there you have your beautiful antique silver finished ring. Wire wrapped with turquoise and crystal passions crystals. Just so beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us here today. If you'd like more start to finish projects, make sure and check out our website. We have so many for you. Make sure and like, share, and subscribe the video if you loved it. And sign up for our email newsletter. The details for that are in the description box below.